You may start, Bante.
Okay. So, of course, this chance I got because of my friend, Dr. George Cook, who introduced me to this association a few weeks ago. I think I should be grateful to him, a great friend. And at the same time, it is always a pleasure to join this sort of meetings and Dhamma associations and share our knowledge. It is my duty, of course, but slightly different from the traditional topics that monks deliver. This is a kind of academic topic, but it's still useful because I'm interested in this topic for the reason that still it has some relation to Sri Lanka, not only for Sri Lanka in Buddhist world, Buddhist tradition, Theravada Buddhist tradition. An-Shih Gao, okay, let's directly talk about the topic. An-Shih Gao in Chinese Buddhism. Of course, the topic was made like a contribution of An-Shih Gao to Chinese Buddhism, the earliest known translator of Buddhist texts. Why An-Shih Gao is important in Chinese Buddhism has to be addressed. And before that, if we try to understand who was An-Shih Gao, because the gathering is unaware of An-Shih Gao, and mainly I think the audience come from maybe science or other fields, not from Chinese or humanities. So maybe your knowledge is very little about this sort of figures. An-Shih Gao, his origin is actually Iran, Prince of Iran. He was Prince of Iran. So then in the 1st century AD, Buddhism came to China, and in the 2nd century AD, An-Shih Gao came to China. So then he started translating his texts. Let's see, this is a figure, a picture of An-Shih Gao. Of course, there are more pictures beautiful than this, but somehow this is what I got. An-Shih Gao is very important figure in Chinese Buddhism. He is respected continuously because Chinese Buddhism after the 1st century until Tang Dynasty, it means around 7 to 9 centuries developed to the climax. So even that period, An-Shih Gao was always referred to as a meditation master. So his influence is remarkable when we examine Chinese Buddhism. But most important thing is actually his text. He selected texts from early Buddhist tradition. We call at that time actually early Buddhism was known in the Chinese world as Hinayana tradition. Hinayana tradition, but nowadays that term is obsolete. So then Parthia, it is called Parthia, that here you can see this map. I think that he came from here. It is said that Parthia. So then here Persis, Arabia. So then from this Iran, Persia, he came. So then Persia, oh, sorry, the Parthia, this region at the time was known as An-Shi Gao. That is why there are several translated from this region. So it means that Buddhism was active in this region by in the 1st century or 2nd century AD. So then the people, scholars, monks who came to China to translate texts and to teach Buddhism, their surname was An-Shi. An was used. That first word, this one, An, this one. this Circa is name, An-Shi Gao. He came from An-Shi Gao. So Parthia was known as An-Shi Gao. So the people who came from Parthia, their name begins with An, this word. An has the meaning, another thing is something like protection, but it is not sure whether what exactly his Sanskrit name was. Normally, this Chinese word is used, and another name given to him is An-Shi. I will read it later. So then let's see that origin of Chinese Buddhism for a while. So officially, of course, even before this, even before the 1st century AD, it is believed that the message of Buddhism reached China, but somehow no records. Some only the stories. Historically, it is accepted that during this emperor Ming his lifetime is 28 to 75, but his rule runs from 25 to 75 AD. So then during this period, Buddhism reached China, and then he had during this period in maybe 67, he had a dream. This story is, of course, it is also mixed with some stories. So this Emperor Ming, Ming Ti, in Chinese it is called kind of sensitive dream he had. Ming Ti Kanmo. It predicts something about future. So this Emperor Ming had a dream. The dream is that how to say that a goat, beautiful goat, radiating lights and very maybe 6 feet long, height and bright. So he was moving above the palace roof. So then it is said that seeing this dream, following day, not the king, the emperor gathered his ministers and inquired the meaning of his dream. And then the ministers explained that this could be the Buddha who had attained the Tao. We know that Taoism was even before Buddhism reached China. Taoism and Confucianism were indigenous religions in China, and Taoism, the Tao, the path, attaining the Tao, was spiritual achievement for the Chinese people. So they understood actually at the beginnings until even Buddhism went to China until Kumarajiva's arrival, means around 5th century or 4th century AD. People understood Buddhism in the light of Taoism. So here we can see that the Buddha had attained the Tao. So he's called Buddha. He flies in there. His body had the billions of the sun. This must be that good. So then they explained, and the king was very interested to learn about this teacher. And then he sent a mission to Central Asia, Central Asian countries in search of the Buddha's teaching, the texts. So then finally this mission met 2 Buddhist masters in Central Asia. In which country they met, I don't know. It is, I still I didn't get. So somehow they met these 2 masters, one Kashyapa Matanga and the other is Gobarana. Actually, sometimes this Matanga, Gobarana is used as Dhammaratana. Dharmaratna or Dhammaratana. These 2 masters, and these 2 masters, they were happy to come to China. This mission invited these 2 masters to come to China to propagate the teachings of the Buddha. So then these 2 masters, it is said that they were escorted to China on the back of white horses, maybe the symbol of respect. And also with the masters, they brought Buddha's relics and also the Buddhist texts to China. So it means it is not a simple mission. They had planned it, I think, properly to bring the monks, bring the texts and the Buddhist relics. To, it means to give a proper standing for Buddhism at that time in China during this Emperor Ming's time. So then somehow it is said that the beginning of the when Buddhism reached China, the indigenous traditions did not welcome it with open hand, but there was some contest, and it is said that there was a challenge, and the especially Taoist masters they challenged Buddhist, and even they convinced king there should be a kind of contest between the Buddhist and Taoist masters, and to put into the test the how to say the ability or the capability of these two sides and power of the text. And what was the suggestion is that the text should be burned. That through the magical powers or psychic powers, if the Taoist can burn Buddhist texts, so then Buddhists should accept defeat and vice versa. So then it is said that Buddhist masters, two masters, especially Kashma Matang, was very clever and he had strong ability in psychic powers. So then he could won this contest and he could burn the texts of Taoist tradition, and finally they had the chance to remain in China. Otherwise, maybe Buddhism could have been expelled from China at that time. But these are stories. Somehow, the important point is that actually this rivalry continued in China for several centuries. Now it is fine. Slaughters took place sometimes. Total crushing between Buddhism and Confucianism, Buddhism and Taoism. These rivalries continued for several centuries. So we can believe that there were some disagreements and also challenges from Taoist and both Confucianism. Actually, by this time, it means first century AD, more than the Taoist, Confucianists were very strong. It's what kind of transitory period. Confucianism was very strong in the Han Dynasty. Sorry, I forgot to tell you that when Buddhism reached China, it was the Han Dynasty. Han Dynasty continued for 400 years. It means Buddhism exactly reached in the middle of the Han Dynasty. It means Han Dynasty had passed 200 years. Its best time already gone, we can say. So Han Dynasty began around 200 BC and it continued up to 200 AD. So then 400 years. And according to Chinese classification, early 200 years or early period of a dynasty is called Western period. So then Western Han Dynasty. And then the latter part of the dynasty is called Eastern Han Dynasty. So then Buddhism went to China in the last period of Western period, or the beginning of the Eastern period. So then this around 80, first 100 AD is this time. So then in the yes, then these masters had the putting in the country in China new land for Buddhism to propagate or to be active in its missionary program. So then they it is said that in the capital at that time the capital was Loyang. In the city, in the capital, the king established a temple for the masters to live in. And for several centuries, the Buddhist monks stayed in this temple and they engaged in translating Buddhist texts in this temple while staying there. These two masters also, actually, it is said that translated 6 books, 6 texts. But out of 6, 5 books are lost. Only one book is remaining. That is called the Book of 42 Chapters. The Book of 42 Chapters. This is normally considered as the first text to be translated from Sanskrit into Chinese by these two masters, Kashyapa Matanga and Gobarana. But this is not a kind of systematic, it does not produce any system of Buddhist thought, either Theravada tradition or Mahayana or any, how to say that, Yogachara or Sarvastivada, any school, any systematic thought of Buddhism is not produced in this text. It is a kind of elective text. It selects from here and there Buddhist, fundamental Buddhist teachings. Here it talks about Nibbana or eight paths, 4 fruits and 4 paths, and then maybe precepts about the monks and how to lead life, something like that. Even though the word chapters is used, but these are very small paragraphs, 42. But it has 42 sections. So this text is the first text not translated into Chinese, but it is not, they are not counted that official text and systematic text which introduced Buddhism to Chinese society. Still, we are waiting for the systematic translators to come into China. So then these two masters were in the 1st century AD, in the middle, latter part of the 1st century AD. So then, of course, when we come to Chinese Buddhism, translation is, we know that, very important. They got many texts from many countries. China was a melting pot of many Buddhist ideas, many traditions. It is not only Buddhism. Actually, it is said that during this period, there was some kind of unsettling situation in the Chinese society because, of course, early Han Dynasty inherited the previous Qing Dynasty's prosperity, but they couldn't maintain. So society started to collapse. And with that, the ideology was Confucianism. Confucianism's influence also started to lose. So then the people were looking for new ideologies, new philosophies. So then they started to study many philosophies from the world. And it is said that because of the Silk Route and from both sea and land, ideas came into China. China was open for all these ideas. It is wonderful to see in Chinese Buddhist canon. You may wonder how it is possible to include that Sankhya philosophy texts are included. So it is a kind of different attitude that's in Chinese mind. So somehow this translation project is very interesting in China. So then these first two most important earlier two translators are to be noted. One is An-Shih Gao, and the second is Lokakshema. Actually, these two masters, An-Shih Gao and Lokakshema. Lokakshema's Chinese name is Trelo Jiachen. Both are foreigners. An-Shih Gao, we said that he is from Parthia, and Lokakshema from Afghanistan or Kushan area. So then, but they are belonging to Han Dynasty. They came to China during the Han Dynasty, and so An-Shi period, An-Shi no, it is believed 147. 47 is the year. Sometimes it is given as 48, and then 177 or 80. These are the time length that is An-Shi was active in China. Parthian prince, his biography is interesting because it is believed that he was a prince. He was to become the king of Parthia, but he gave up his princely career and he became a Buddhist monk, and then finally came to China to propagate the Buddha's teaching. And also his name, he was known as the An-Shi. An-Shih Gao is taken to be a pen name. So his scholarly name Circa, but his name An-Shi. There are a number of biographical treatments about An-Shi Gao and his translations. So then, Taitse means he was a prince who will become the king later. So then it means he has very strong family background, and he has renounced the world to become a monk, and then he became a missionary. So then in this year 47 or 48, second year of Emperor Huang, Jiang reigned during the Eastern Han Dynasty. An-Shi Gao traveled from Scythia in Central Asia via the Silk Road to Loyang, the capital of the Han Dynasty. There he decided to teach and spread the Buddhist doctrine. It was in Loyang that An-Shi Gao began learning Chinese. A gifted linguist, he became fluent in the language very quickly. So then, as I mentioned, that White Horse Temple was erected in the first century AD, around 65 or 67, by Emperor Ming. So then this An-Shi Gao also took residence in this same temple, Pai Ma Se. This I have put a temple because this temple still remains till today, 1,900 years old. Eastern Han Dynasty. So here it is, Pai Ma Se. And then Loyang here in between Beijing and Shanghai, Loyang. So if we turn to that biographical notes about An-Shi Gao, Kao San Chuang is a very famous text, famous book about masters who translated texts. It was composed by a master called Hui Jiao. So then he had lived around 5th century or AD. So then 497 to 554, he mentioned about that An-Shi Gao lived in Loyang 20 years. He was active over there and translated several texts, nearly more than 30 texts translated. In the early period of Emperor Huang's rule, this venerable monk had visited China. He had demonstrated extraordinary abilities of memory recall. He was able to memorize all at once. He became fluent in the Chinese language in a short period. Thereafter, he translated many sutras from foreign languages into Chinese. So then his abilities are praised in the later biographies. This Kao San Chuan is a collection of biographies of the masters who translated sutras into Chinese from various languages. Actually, that Chinese Buddhist texts which remain today in Chinese are not only from Sanskrit, from maybe different languages. It is said that some Central Asian dialects, uh, the names are given like what is Sogdian, etc. So it is not one language. From different languages, the texts were translated. It's not one language, not Sanskrit, not Pali, but from various languages, texts were translated. There was a bodhisattva who came from the state of Arshaka. His name was An-Shi Gao. All sutra texts which were explained by him are very famous even now. Those texts show the path for purification. He also disseminated the doctrine in the kingdom of Han. It means he's not only a text translator, but also he is a preacher. He has been teaching the Dhamma. Oral and written records by him were counted as millions of characters. Some scholars have some doubt whether he was a monk because his name Anqing, even though sometimes used circa. But in references, we can find that he is referred to as Hersang. Hersang is very famous word for monks in China, even today. Chucha, Hersang. Chucha means Chucha means who leave the home, renounce. Chia is family. Chucha means leave the family. Hersang is monk. So here it is mentioned that in Chinese, Chucha Shuta means he left the family life, home, and practiced the path. And finally came to China to propagate the Dharma. And here explains his abilities, actually, which were we mentioned in English, means his abilities are very how to say, very high. It means anything he can understand very quickly. And also it is mentioned that his arguments are very clear. Language is not that beautiful, clear, but it is intelligible for the reader. And he translated sutras like Anapanasmriti Sutra, and finally more than 37 texts. So later there is evaluation about An-Shih Gao, that is in Chinese Buddhism in the Han Dynasty. It started to develop in two directions. One is that fundamental Buddhist teachings and directed at meditation tradition, and the other is wisdom tradition. These two masters who came in the second century AD, they were the founders of these two directions. An-Shih Gao is considered as the initiator of meditation tradition because he translated early Buddhist texts, early Buddhist meditation texts like Anapanasmriti Sutta, Anpan So I Ching, and then the texts related to meditation like Khanda, Dhatu, and Ayatana. I will show that the contents of these sutras. Of course, these texts still have not been translated into English because his texts are very difficult to translate because he was the first one, officially the first translator. So then he had to select the vocabulary, and then is difficult, obscure. His language is kind of not that smooth as later, like Xuan Chuang or those masters, or even Kumarajiva. Their language is beautiful, but An-ShiGao's language is not that easy. So it's very difficult to deal with his words. Somehow we can understand the basic idea, because one thing is that these texts have some relation to early Buddhism, from because we are familiar with the early Buddhist teachings and the Pali suttas. This because that An-Shi Gao is considered as he was not a Mahayana monk. Some have doubt. Still, there is doubt whether he was a Mahayana monk. But his teaching, the teachings which are included in his texts are not Mahayana teachings. He does not talk about that Madhyamika philosophy like Shunyata, or Yogachara philosophy like Kale Vijnana. Those proper Mahayana teachings are never found in An-Shi Gao's text. Instead, we find the early Buddhist teachings. That is why we are close to his text, because he talks about Four Noble Truths, then Arya Tangika Magga, Eight Noble Path, and then the Satipatthana or Chattaro Satipatthana. These are the material that he used to introduce Buddhist teachings to the Chinese world, to familiar with Buddhism. Then sectarian affiliation. Is generally agreed that the text translated by An-Shi Gao belong to Sarvastivada tradition. We know that Sarvastivada still belong to Hinayana tradition, small vehicle, not Mahayana. So then Sautrantika and Sarvastivada are considered as Hinayana traditions, who were proposing that Arahant ideal. So then the traditional understanding of An-Shi Gao is that he worked on Hinayana texts. Nevertheless, we can find few Mahayana texts and being put into Chinese by An-Shi Gao. Mainly, his works represent early Buddhist tradition, but because his bulk is very large, some texts, they say that some are Mahayana texts. But actually, I haven't read, because so many texts are difficult to read. I read what are easy for me to understand. The discussion is revolved around the fact whether the birthplace of An-Shi Gao was under the influence of Sarvastivadi tradition, or the texts he got to work were not brought by him to China from Parthia, but they were in China. Why An-Shi Gao selected these texts to translate? Whether it is due to these two factors, whether these texts were already in China, these sutras, so what he had, he translated, or Parthia was under the influence of Sarvastivada, so he was familiar with Sarvastivada texts, consequently he translated them into Chinese. What was the reason for him to select these texts? It's not clear. So then what is his, whether he was completely, totally a Sarvastivada monk? But it's a question. But so far he is considered as the Sarvastivada monk, because who are much advanced in the An-Shi Gao studies, they see that he has translated Sarvastivada Abhidharma texts also. So then he should be a Sarvastivada monk. Or otherwise, he is expert in Sarvastivada, maybe Mahayana monk. We don't know. It can happen. There even nowadays there are Mahayana monks, but they study maybe Pali canon and they write about Pali canon. So he's very flexible in Buddhist tradition. Of course, in Sri Lankan Buddhism also, we can be expert in any tradition that we want. It does not mean that we are Mahayana monks. So, how to say, either Theravada or Mahayana. Sectarian affiliation is not a matter for academic or translation projects. A bodhisattva is another question. So then, if it is, he is not Sarvastivada, so then whether he was a Mahayana monk, because bodhisattva is the goal for the Mahayana monks. In relation to the personal persuasion of An-Shih Gao, there is a problem whether he was a follower of Arahant ideal or Mahayana follower. The reason is he has been referred to as a bodhisattva. So then whether he was a bodhisattva, if it is bodhisattva, he should be Mahayana. But I think because of the time restraint, we cannot remain with the small information. So we can, if we evaluate role of An-Shih Gao or the significance of An-Shih Gao, we can appreciate him as one, he is a text translator, another missionary, third meditation master who had great influence upon the later generations. So then he translated several texts, especially we know that Chinese canon, Chinese Buddhist canon is the largest religious canon in the world. It has, in the standard edition nowadays being used is called Taiso edition, which was done in Japan in the 20th century, early 20th century. So it has 100 volumes. So then the first and the second volume are called Ahan-Ching. Ahan-Ching means Agama texts. So then Agama texts represent the are similar to Pali Nikaya texts. So then Agama texts, the first translator of Agama Sutras into Chinese was An-Shih Gao. So he has made a kind of unique contribution in the translation project, introducing this genre of Buddhist literature, these suttas into Chinese. And then he's a missionary. It is from his biographical notes, which were written later by masters. It mentioned that he was not only a text translator, but he's a preacher. He had been a missionary. Actually, I should mention how how his project was aligned with the contemporary trends. Why he selected meditation texts, especially you see later in a while that he translated that Anapana Sati Sutta, if we use the Pali term, but in Sanskrit Anapana Smriti Sutra, in which describe the practice of Anapanasati, which is well known for us. We all know about how to practice Anapanasati. So then he introduced this specific meditation method to China. But in China, with the Taoism, there was a breathing meditation technique. Why he introduced this? This is a kind of very intelligent strategic method, because when a missionary work or missionary project is going on in a foreign land, I think basic theories from known to unknown. We have to give something known by these people. People know and people like. So then we can give our own things. So it is maybe the reason. We can see even from the both these traditions. I mentioned two traditions. One is dhyana tradition or meditation tradition of An-Shih Gao, and the prajna tradition or wisdom tradition of Lokakshema. These two traditions has their counterparts in their work in Chinese society at the time when they were active at that time. So then this when An-Shih Gao was there, this breathing exercise or breathing meditation was among the Taoist tradition. So they used breathing meditation with the purpose of both purifying body and purifying the mind. They believed that practicing breathing exercise can lead one to eternity. They had the idea of eternity. That's why actually Taoism had a very close language to Buddhism. Of course, there are final attainment and so many things are totally different against us, but uh, they were a kind of spiritual tradition. Inner development was discussed, and kind of like Abhidhamma like philosophy was developed. They call metaphysical thinking was discussed. It means some subtle analysis were developed by them. So Buddhism had to rely on them for several centuries. So this influence, so it means something similarity to be noted by the people had to be given from the Buddhist side. So then An-Shih Gao, I think maybe he's a prince and maybe he know how to bring the people to the one side. So then from Buddhist tradition, he introduced Anapanasati. Why not Metta Sutta? But he introduced the Anapanasati Sutta. And it is said that Buddhist tradition, Buddhist meditation, Anapanasati was more subtler and more refined method than the Taoist method. So it was appealing to the Chinese mind. So then people started to liking Buddhist tradition. So then as a missionary, I think An-Shih Gao leave a legacy for us. And still we have to learn from, if you want to spread Buddhism in foreign lands, I think An-Shih Gao's method, I feel that still valid. So then meditation master, of course, it is related to my description. His takes this Anapanasati Sutra. And also there is another sutra. In Chinese, it is called Yunzi Ruqing. Its contents are the analysis of Khanda, Dhatu, and Ayatan. I will show the contents later for you. These are the content, so he translated, and these are used normally for meditation. And later generations of Chinese Buddhism, we know that in China they developed several schools, their own Buddhist schools they developed based on Buddhist sutras. Like you might have heard Tian Tai tradition. Some people call Tendai. Actually, Tendai may be Japan or somewhere, but in real pronunciation is Tian Tai. It is very developed meditation technique. The masters who developed this Tian Tai tradition, they always refer to An-Shih Gao's this Anpan So I Ching, Anapana Smriti Sutra. So An-Shih Gao is very important because he takes this early Buddhist practice. We know that even the Buddha first practice as a young prince under the Damba tree, that Anapanasati, that is the first technique. So then we can see that how An-Shih Gao is important in Chinese Buddhism till today. Okay, let's see some translation. It has very famous Buddhist texts, sutras, which we use in Pali tradition today. They were translated by An-Shih Gao into Chinese at that time. Some are not, some are. This one is Dasutta Sutta. Dasutta Sutta is in the Digha Nikaya. These are last suttas. This is a collection of the Buddhist teachings, list of Buddhist teachings that was translated by An-Shih Gao. I think all the purpose is there. It means these are collection of the teachings. So then people become familiar with the classifications. So the various under 1 to 10 or 12. So all the good, like Anguttara Nikaya, we know that many teachings are classified under the numbers. So similar function is performed in Dasuttara Sutta too, Sangiti and Dasuttara Sutta. So perhaps An-Shih Gao intentionally selected these texts to make people familiar with the terminology and the classification, 5 precepts, 10 precepts, 8 precepts. So then people know this literature and they know the, how to say that, extension of or the our literature, length and width of the literature. People get familiar. So then this sutra is similar to Mahanidana Sutta, Renpan Isang Ching. That is similar to Mahanidana Sutta. Mahanidana Sutta is important for us. That is in the Digha Nikaya. Perhaps you may have read. That is about Paticcasamuppada. That is about mainly Paticcasamuppada. And then Ije Lyosa Sovinching, what is the parallel of this sutta? I don't know. Then this one is very important. The teaching is, it is similar. It introduces the Four Noble Truths, the core of Buddhist teaching, early Buddhism, and of course the whole Buddhist tradition. This is the core teaching of Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths, and it is similar to Satya Sutta. You know that in Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta and then the Satya Sutta. These are two texts that deal with the Four Noble Truths in the early suttas. So then An-Shih Gao selects these texts, introduce the main teachings to the society, to Chinese society. This is Penxiang, Yi Qing, and Sifa Fei Fa Qing. This is something about the Buddhist monks or the monastic behavior, some problematic behaviors. This is about Sappurisa Sutta. Right and wrong. It means some attitudinal problems are discussed. And then this one is important again. Pachang Tao. Pachang Tao Ching. It is Arya Atthangika Mag, 8 Noble Path. And then Chichu San Quan Ching. That is the places where our consciousness states. This one is also in means this word is in. It means who in, 5 aggregates. So is dhatu, attarasa dhatu. I will show you it later. Our senses, sense objects, and the consciousness. That is the attarasa dhatu. And the ru is our dwadasanga ayatana. Internal senses and externals, and what you can feel is this is the early Buddhism. Early Buddhism is more about our sense experience and how sense experience produces ignorance, and how we are finally led by our own experience and led into ignorance and consequently to suffering. So these early Buddhist texts and these teachings and the early Buddhist understanding of human experience can be seen in these texts. Okay, so there are some. This teaching, I think, is a Mahayana understanding. Ahan Kochi Inventing. This is about. This is said that not a sutra actually, even though it is called in Chinese. Means this word. Ting means sutra. But even though it is the sutra, but not the sutra taught by the Buddha, but it is an explanation about the Dwadasanga Paticcasamuppada. It is produced an explanation, commentary by An-Shih Gao. An-Shih Gao has given a talk about this Paticcasamuppada. It has been composed. In Zen Buddhism, Heinrich Domelian states that during the 2nd century CE, there was an upsurge of interest in various meditation practices among Chinese elite. Thus, the abundance of newly translated information about Buddhist meditation during the Eastern Han was one of the reasons for the growth of Buddhism at that time. So then, why meditation texts were selected. We can see here. And also, An-Shi Gao's translations also included a significant number of sutras on meditation techniques, including the Ta Anpan So I Ching. This is Maha Anapanasati Sutra, the Great Anapanasati Sutra, Chansing Fa Xiang Ching, and Yinseru Ching, which contributed directly to the successful dissemination of the Buddha's teachings in China. These are the texts which is believed that were useful in propagating meditation. This is that Anpan So I Ching. The scripture on the Anapana Smriti, mindfulness of breathing and out, was arguably one of the most influential scriptures rendered into Chinese during the early period. This is shown, for instance, by the number of known commentaries devoted specifically to it, as well as by a handful of quotations from the text found in early commentaries. So then Arthur Link's seminal historical documents interest in the scripture, which probably lasted until the beginning of the 5th century CE. So until 5th century. So then this text has influenced Anpan So I Ching or Anapanasmriti Sutra. Reached the sure conclusion that the meditative practices expounded by the Anpan So I Ching played a crucial role in the development of early Chinese Buddhist thought. Most of the texts are now lost, except for the Tao Te Ching, Ta An Pan Ching, and the Chan Xiang. So some texts, even though it is said that 37 texts were translated, but some are not available. There are two Anapanasmriti sutras. Then here the method given in the sutra is what is counting. Counting, how to count the breath is explained in the sutra. Counting the in-breath and the out-breath from 1 to 10. Do not count over 10. And do not count less than 10. Count 1 at the end of breathing in and count 2 at the end of the breathing out. If you count any other number, then 2 when it should be 2. Start counting over from 1. Forget, we start from 1. You count any other number than 9 when it should be 9. Start counting over from 1. Go back to number 1, the method. So this sutra is Kanda Dhatu Ayatana, this Vincharuchi. So the content of this sutra is many. Mainly this Skanda Dhatu and Ayatana. Apart from that, it talks about 37 factors of enlightenment, like Chattaro Satipatthana, who mindful basis of mindfulness, and then Satara Samapadana, Satara Iddhipada, Pancha Indriya, Pancha Bala, Sattabojjhanga, and Ariyatangika Magga. Also, you can see that he finds always the contents of early Buddhist teachings. Here it sees that these two traditions, Bodhipaksha Dharmas. Okay, I'll stop the slides here, and then I want to go to another text. I want to show you some. This is I don't know whether it is useful or not, but I want to show that how this An-Shi Gao is working to transmit early Buddhist, the core of Buddhist teachings to Chinese world. So this is the Four Source teaching. I will make kind of a small translation. Of course, these are not easy things for me too. This is about Sir teaching means four Arya Satyas, four noble truths, about the four noble truths. So then it is similar to the new, how to say that, current scholarship has concluded that this An-Shih Gao's translation of the Four Noble Truths is similar to the Pali tradition's Satchivibanga Sutta. So then I have placed a comparative the Pali and Sanskrit. Sorry, Pali and Chinese. We can see some similarities actually. So here in this, perhaps some of you are familiar in the Satchivibanga Sutta. Buddha says that Sariputta is very clever and he has deep wisdom and he can explain the Four Noble Truths. And Sariputta and Moggallana are like mother and father. Sayatapi bhikkhave janeta evang Sariputto. Sayatapi jatas apadeta evang Moggallano. So, how to say that? Sariputta is like a mother, Janita. And what Sariputta does, Sariputta bhikkhave sotapatti pale vini. Sariputta can lead one into the stream entrance. And Moggallano Uttamatte, Moggallana Arahant can lead you to more in the course of the path. So this information we can see in the Chinese text too. So then Chinese version. But the important thing is because An-Shih Gao. An-Shih Gao is representing early Buddhist tradition, but he is not the Pali tradition. So therefore, his text is slightly different from us. In Buddhist tradition, how to say that, we know that after the second council, there were 18 Buddhist sects. According to Mahayana tradition, not 18, 21 Buddhist sects had developed. So then it is believed that this 18, let's take 18 sects, they had their own Tripitakas. So then maybe these Tripitakas had their Sutta, Vinaya, Abhidhamma, slight variations because all were maintained oral traditions. So some textual differences, order of the text is different, but main teaching is the same. So then here that the wordings that is here order is different. So that is why you can see here yellow color, you can find yellow color in Pali here. Here this color is here. So there are, but the main content is the same. Slight variations are there, but we can see that here that the Four Noble Truth is explained in this sutta. So here that in this section, what is the Four Noble Truths is asked. Hertang Weise means what is the four? Iwe Ku means the first is suffering. Awe Si. Si means origin. Sanwei Chin means Nirodha. Sawe Tao. Tao is the path always. You remember this word Tao. Taoism that we know always. Taoism word come from this word Tao. So path. So then four, and here okay. So then here that it asks, is this explain this Satchivibanga Sutta you must read because it has more explanation about suffering than we find in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. That's why we identify this should be this An-Shih Gao's translation should be Satchivibanga Sutta. What is the suffering? Dukkha Satcha. Puti. This word. He means truth. He means truth. What is the truth? Truth of suffering. Who is suffering? So then, Sang Ku, Lao Ku, Ping Ku means Jati, Jara, Yadi, Marana. And then, Apyehi Sampayoga, Pyehi Vipayoga, Yampi Chang Labittampi Dukkan Sankittena Panchapada. 8 kind of sufferings which are found in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta are given here too. But here, slightly different from the Pali. Satyavibhanga Sutta. Because in the Pali Satyavibhanga Sutta, 13 sufferings are given. Dukkha, Domana, Supayasa, Sambhava, and these are not given here. But main content is the same. And also important thing is what is the jati, what is the jara, what is the marana, what is the not getting what we want. These are explained in the Satyavibhanga Sutta, not in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. So these explanations are explained in the Chinese version too. So in this way, you can see that An-Shih Gao has produced the description of the major teaching of early Buddhism through his translation. So he introduces the mainstream Buddhism to the Chinese world, make the Chinese people familiar with early Buddhist teachings. Okay, this sutta. Okay. And let me go to the other one. Which one? This one. This is about the Arya Atthangika Magga Sutra. So this I tried to find a Pali parallel, but Pali parallel we can't find, because we know, as I mentioned, these suttas come from different Buddhist traditions. So they have especially Sarvastivada. You know that Agama Sutras in Pali canon has, we believe that only one tradition, that is the Staviravada tradition, or Vibhajyavada we call, or Theravada. But in Chinese Agama, the sutras have Sarvastivada, Mahisasaka, Lokottaravada. Several Buddhist schools, their suttas are included within the Agama collection. So that's the difference. So this Sarvastivada text slightly different from ours. So it make it it takes some time to find the exact translation. So then here somehow the main teaching is the same. Eight Noble Path is Eight Noble Path, but from sutta to sutta, because of the tradition, oral tradition, and some maybe traditional differences, there are content-wise small differences. So then here explains the what is the samadhi. Each this word, chen, even nowadays it is used. Samadhi, correct view, right view. So then, what is the right view? It is explained in terms of Dasavattuka Samadhi. 10 kind of Samadhi. It means believing in the dana, yaga, and then in the mother, father. We believe in that, and this world, next world, and the practitioners, etc. But it is not. I can't find in a Pali version. In Pali version, normally Eight Noble Path in many places defined. Of course, in Pali version there is, but today I couldn't find the exact sutta. But it is defined in terms of Four Noble Truths. So Samma Sankappa. So then Nekkhamma, Sankappa, Avyapada, Avihimsa. So then the verbal restraining, Samma Sankappa, Samma Vacha. So Samma Vacha. So then Samma Kamma, Samma Ajiva. These are more or less the same. So then you can see that he finds the Arya Atthangika Magga a single text to make the people to translate. I think time is 6 o'clock, madam. But final, the sutta. This is also the influential text. This is Khandadhatu Ayatana. In means this first word is in represents the 5 aggregates, Panchakhanda. Is dhatu means 18 dhatus, 18 elements. Ru is 12 sense bases, internal and external. So apart from that, it discusses the 37 factors of enlightenment. So then here the summary is present. I would say in this sutra, three factors are discussed. Iwei Uin means first 5 aggregates. Second, Liopan. Liopan means that senses. And then the Ru, Ayatana. So then it asks the question, what are the 5 aggregates? Iwe se means rupa, thong is vedana, syang is sanya, sing is sankhara, she is consciousness. This is the 5 aggregates. And then it goes to se, rupa, vedana, sanya, sankhara, vinyana. Then it explains how to know each aggregates, and then the nature of the aggregates, anicca, dukkha. More one word is more extra word is kong. This word kong is sunyata, and sunyata is in normally Pali words doesn't occur, very rare, but here in this sutta it happened. It has occurred. Sunyata and anatta. Paisan means anatta. And then 18 elements. 18 elements has, what are the 18 elements? I, then Rupa, Yen is I, Sa is Rupa, Sa is consciousness. Then is ear, Sang is sound, and then the Sha is ear consciousness, like that, 18. So according to the senses, sense basis, and sense consciousness. So then 6, 3 kind of, how to say, 6 multiple 3 is 18. So Dwadasa Ayatana means internal and external senses. So you can see that these are all one word by word is a new concept. It's a kind of vocabulary. It's making us familiar. These are even for us, Sinhala Buddhist or any Buddhist, at the beginning is we are to learn these words. Ayatana, Paticcasamuppada, Atharasa Dhatu, Khanda Dhatu, Ayatana. All these are, we are to at the beginning learn, then only we can go deeper into the Buddhist philosophy. So I think that this fundamental task is fulfilled through the translations of An-Shih Gao. That is the importance and the role that An-Shih Gao played for Chinese Buddhism to provide a strong basis, provide the basic knowledge of Buddhist philosophy for the Chinese world. Thank you. I think this is what I wanted to tell through this talk. So I guess even though I use Chinese, but it is not Chinese, more about these are just to show you because they still have not been translated into English word by word. So I have to use my little knowledge and to explain you how An-Shih Gao has selected early Buddhist teachings, early Buddhist suttas to popularize and to introduce Buddhism into China. I think he was successful. So because Buddhism ever flourishes in China. Thank you. And wish you all enlightenment.
Much merit, Bhante. That was absolutely fascinating. And to think that this An-Shi Gao has picked out all the core, the most important suttas and the core of the philosophy and the teaching, and translated all this. And Bhante's knowledge of Chinese also is equally remarkable. Can we please open the floor for questions? I'm sure there are a lot of comments and questions. Thank you very much, Bhante. I'm, of course, very happy that we had this. It is a very rare and amazing opportunity to have been able to listen to this, Bhante. Thank you ever so much.
So I will remove the slides.
Yes, Bhante. Any questions, please? Time is up, but yes, Anuja, please unmute yourself. Unmute, Anuja.
I don't know whether you can hear me now.
Very clear, very clear. Now is very clear.
Right. Venerable Sir, thank you very much for that absolutely comprehensive explanation of the role that An-Shi Gao played in the introduction of Buddhism to China. Now, from what you explained, he translated really the most important aspects of Theravada Buddhism as we know it here in Sri Lanka. Now, I'd like to just find out from you how much of that still exists in China today.
Still valid. Chinese Buddhist monks and nuns, they seek, of course, later tradition-wise, Chinese Buddhism turned into Mahayana tradition, but their focus on early Buddhist teachings and meditation still remains the same. There's no difference in that. Buddhist monks, nuns, they go to Burma, Thailand, even come to Sri Lanka to practice. So then, I think in An-Shi Gao is still influencer.
So in terms of, because, you know, we get the impression that with the ascendancy of communism and also subsequently the problems in the 60s with the, you know, destruction of monasteries and all sorts of things, what they call the Cultural Revolution, that that much of these things disappeared. So about how many people in China practice this pure form of Buddhism today?
No, cultural revolution's impact is temporary because Chinese tradition is very, very strong. Even today, still in China, there are many, many followers. And Chinese Buddhism is not only in China, in Taiwan, in Korea, in Japan, Malaysia, everywhere. Chinese communities everywhere. So Chinese is not only in China. We can't confine Chinese world into only China. I think it's not correct. So Chinese world is bigger than China. So Chinese Buddhism survives even without China. So with them, all these things continues. So even of course, cultural revolution make a difference. But now again, the interest in the tradition revive again and again. So now again they are with much force. I think in universities they have started translating into simple Chinese these texts, and of course they train Pali scholars, Sanskrit scholars. I think in China there is a kind of, I feel, revival of Buddhism. I'm much positive about that.
Just for, if you don't mind, I'd just like to make one little remark. You made that remark that Chinese Buddhism is not only found in China, but in other places. Now, I'd just like to say that when I was in Jakarta, I was there for about 1.5 years. There was a very strong Buddhist community there. So in Indonesia, there are about 8 million Buddhists, and they are mostly Chinese. And they actually practice Theravada Buddhism, because I used to go to that temple, and you know, it was pure Theravada Buddhism.
Great, no matter.
Yes.
Any other comments or questions, please? I'm sure there are. That was really an amazing session, Bhante. Thank you ever so much. Any questions? Kolita, you have any comments or questions? Mr. Das Miriyagalla? You can unmute. You all can unmute. You're allowed to unmute.
Yeah, Manoli, just to make a comment, I think it was a absolutely fascinating talk. Thank you very much, Bhante, for your knowledge of the Chinese language and also taking the effort to translate all that, study it in such depth. I think listening to your talk, the fact that, the original Buddhism, from a very early time in history has gone to China. I suppose if you research those subjects in a little bit greater detail from what you are doing now, we may be able to even unfold the real true teachings of the Buddha, which may have got warped over the time, even in Sri Lanka. So I suppose going into depth of those translations from the earliest periods, some of the true teachings of the mind, the way we should practice anapanasati, etc., may still be there as close as possible to the original teachings of the Buddha. So that's an area that you could research in greater detail. With that comment, I want to thank you once again for that brilliant talk, and Manoj especially for making all this possible for us. Thank you, everybody.
There is a comment from Analea, I think different groups of Chinese practice this Theravada Mahayana in China and in Tibet. And some are followers of Theravada, some Tibetan and some Chinese Buddhism. I mean, there's a mixture. Right, so that brings us to the end of a very fascinating session. Much merit to you, Bhante. And we normally end. It's really very, very fortunate for us to have got to know Bhante, and that was at that webinar that we had. Samantha Jayatilaka from UK. Bhante, you have an international following. There's Jaika, a doctor from the UK. There was Mahendra Gonsalko related a few minutes ago. So many from, and there's from Australia, I can see, Tamarasi, and so many others. So much merit, Bhante. We would like to end with transferring the merit to the Devas and the departed. Bhante, would you please recite the usual stanzas for that when we end?
Okay. Idamme ñātīnaṁ hotu sukitā hontu ñāteo. Idamme ñātīnaṁ hotu sukitā hontu ñāteo. Idamme ñātīnaṁ hotu sukitā hontu ñāteo. Ākāsattā ca bhummattā devā nāga mahiddhikā. Puññantaṁ anumoditvā ciran rakkhantu sāsanaṁ. Ākāsattā ca bhummattā devā nāga mahiddhikā. Puññantaṁ anumoditvā ciran rakkhantu desanaṁ. Ākāsattā ca bhummattā devā nāga mahiddhikā. Puññantaṁ anumoditvā ciran rakkhantu maṁ paranti.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Much
Thank you,
merit,
madam.
Bhante. Thank you. And thank you everyone for having joined this amazing session. Thank you. And we'll meet next Saturday. I will close the meeting now.
Thank you, Dr. Srinagar.
Thank you for joining, Sujata.